The idea was to guide and help people in maximizing their performance with the knowledge and expertise, just as Rose had done for me. In a patient and kind way. I wanted to be able to do that with people, whether it was performance on a field, on a court, in a courtroom, as a police officer, as a law enforcement agent. Worked with been humbled to be able to work with a lot of different people to rise to their maximum potential. There's a mechanics manual, there's a rule book, but the book that I'm trying to create for officials will be that book to help understand the right body language, the words and the actions to connect with coaches and players and stakeholders, just as a rule book would be, or just as a mechanics manual would be. And both of those things are guidelines. It's not always going to be the right thing that we say or do, but if we can have as much knowledge as we possibly can have from people that have been there and done it, so to speak, that communication handbook is something that it's dear to my heart. This is really cool. So, like, we just spoke about the education on areas beyond rules and mechanics. Officiating is just not rules and mechanics. We have to educate beyond that. So whether that's mindset, and then the bridge off of that is the communication piece. I mean, we didn't even talk about the goal setting, the confidence and the visualization and the stress management and the emotional regulation. Those are all things that my referee subscribers, we talk about on a weekly or monthly basis. But then the elevating piece by adding, I think I put in quotes on my little paper here, the how-to of communication of our work. Human behavior is predictable. So if we can understand the patterns of human behavior, we can make an educated guess, which is what I'm doing when I'm officiating. I'm taking the rules that are written in a book, I'm applying it to living, breathing, moving humans on a court, and I'm making my best application of those. I'm not going to call it a guess because someone will snip that out and put it on some other kind of video.
And now, Season 2, Episode 14, Letter M, Mindset. Join host Dana Pappas with special guest Dr. Maggie Tieman on the From A to Zebra podcast.
Welcome back to the From A to Zebra podcast. I'm Dana Pappas. We're excited to bring a guest to this episode who brings a diverse background and unique skill set to speak on an important topic that can help officials to achieve success regardless of sport. We actually have brought in a special guest from Season 1, my boss, Dr. Karissa Niehoff, to join our guest tonight. Karissa, welcome back.
Thank you, Dana. It's great to be back, especially to be alongside your special guests.
Excellent. So we're going to get more into that and why Karissa's on with our guest in just a second, but we're going to do some introductions. So on this episode, we're actually talking about the letter M and the word mindset. Our guest will visit with us about how officials' mindset is critical to their success on the court, field, ice, mat, pitch, anywhere that they're officiating. And she'll share with us ideas about how to get the most out of yourself in the sports you officiate. Our guest today is Dr. Maggie Tieman. Maggie is a sport and performance psychology professional, NCAA women's basketball referee, FIBA referee, LPGA Class A teaching professional, professor, nutrition specialist, and certified strength and conditioning coach. And somewhere in all of that, she sleeps. Maybe, I don't know. But following a decorated Division I softball career at the University of Vermont, Dr. Maggie taught physical and health education in Connecticut for 14 years and coached field hockey, basketball, and softball. In 2007, Dr. Maggie was recognized as the NASPE Eastern District Association's Secondary Physical Education Teacher of the Year. She's also a two-time Connecticut Coach of the Year, a member of the Northeast Agenda Women's Hall of Fame, and 2019 inductee into the Connecticut Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. So Karissa, before we really get started and dive in with Dr. Maggie, how do you know her?
Well, prior to the list of accolades that you've just run through, and trust me, there are many more that fill in the gaps there, and all of the degrees that she's achieved in the collegiate and professional achievements, I knew Maggie as a high school student. In 1993, I was hired to teach and coach at Litchfield High School in Litchfield, Connecticut, and the first sport I was to coach was field hockey. And I was really excited about that. I was a Division I field hockey player, so I thought this is going to be great. However, anytime you have a new job as a teacher, coach, what have you, you're a little nervous. And, you know, I was fairly young. I was 27. And so it's August of 1993, and I pull up in my car to Litchfield High School in a place where you can get out of your car and park. But before I could get out of my car, I managed to park it. This young lady comes running over bouncing all the way, puts her arms on my driver's side window, looks in the car and says, "Are you our new field hockey coach?" And I said, "Yes, I am." It's, "Well, I'm Maggie." So I said, "Nice to meet you, Maggie." So I'll have to make some skips in the fast forward motion here, but for the next 4 years, Maggie Tieman was an absolute stellar student, a stellar athlete. The sports that I coached, in particular field hockey and basketball, but then she also played softball. But she excelled at everything she did. She was a leader from ninth grade on. She did student peer educators and student leadership groups and signed up for everything and did everything. And she aced her academics. And she was just sunshine and joy in the hallways. And I'll tell you, there was no more tougher competitor on a field, on a court, on a diamond. Maggie had some asthma challenges. I don't know if, Maggie, you've told anybody that, but she would literally be heaving and leave everything on the field, scoring goals on field hockey, winning. We won the state championship. It was 32 degrees and with snow and sideways wind, and she's in her kilt, and our team won. Basketball, she was the absolute general on the basketball court. And I remember many times she would be dribbling and might get tripped up, so she could fall to the court and keep her dribble. So she's dribbling like 3 inches high off the floor as she gets herself up after getting tripped, continues to go to the hoop and make the shot. Softball, she would hit the skin off the ball. And it was just everything she did was of the utmost performance. Her mom told me that when she was in gymnastics as a kid, she could press into a handstand at age 3.
Gosh.
You know, everything Maggie has done, she has used her gifts, she's used her heart. She is the most kind human being. And I'm not surprised at all that she is where she is now, leading in so many capacities and focusing, in addition to officiating, on mindset. She was a student that lived in mindset and very mature. And it's something that I'm not surprised at all that she's on the circuit doing things around helping us all think about how we feel, how we function, how we show up. So, Dana, I'm sorry for that long answer. And I could continue on longer, but went from the time in 1993 to where she is now. She's been nothing but excellent, nothing but kind. And I know teachers are not supposed to have favorites, but my last comment would be that it was very easy to say if there was one kid, who was your kid? It was Maggie. In fact, the principal of our high school was my mentor. So she was now considered first generation, and I was second generation, and Maggie was third generation. And I know that she's gone on for fourth generation. So there's a very special bond there and very special memories that will always be the best ones that I have is our time together at Litchfield.
That's amazing, Karissa. And, Maggie, we're going to get into it here in a second, but the way Maggie came to be on this podcast was just one of those very small world. Those of you in the officiating community listening to this, you're going to find out that the connections between people in athletics are many and the degrees of separation are few. So it just so happened Karissa was in my office one day, and it was during the women's NIT at Butler University. And I mentioned to her, hey, I'm going to head out this afternoon and watch my friend Tyler Trimble, who's been a guest on the show, work WNIT at Butler. And just as a coincidental aside, Karissa mentioned to me, well, I wonder if Maggie's working. I was like, Maggie who? And she's like, Maggie Tieman. So then a light bulb goes on over my head, and I'm like, I've heard her speak before. Go back through text messages. Sure enough, I had asked a question to Nate, who can't be with us tonight, of, hey, do you know Maggie Tieman? She's speaking at the Professional Association of Volleyball Officials Clinic. And he was like, yes, I do. So Karissa texted Maggie, was like, hey, Dana in our office is doing this podcast. Would you be on it? Maggie said yes. Several months later, I was able to connect with Maggie, and now she's here. So Maggie, all of those introductions, high praise from Dr. Karissa Niehoff, CEO of the NFHS. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dana. I had to gather myself after listening to Coach, as I had so fondly referred to Karissa for so many years, that it brought back a flood of emotions. So I'm glad it was a lengthy piece. I'm embarrassed about it, humbled and embarrassed, but it was lengthy enough to allow me to gather myself to actually be able to speak. So Thank you.
Well, I know one thing about Karissa, working with her when she speaks, it's always from the heart. And there's been more than one time that she'll say something where I feel myself welling up. So I know how you feel, Maggie. It's she means what she says, and she's spoken very highly of you. Anybody who goes to the NFHS office and Karissa's office sees that picture of you from your state championship, I think it was. And what year was that, Karissa?
1990.
All right, 1996. So I got to see Maggie as a high school student and didn't even know who it was at the time. The picture's always been there, so it's just kind of full circle. So it's really cool. But yeah, we're going to jump into it. So of course, thanks for being with us on From A to Zebra. Before we got into the topic of the day, we've already gone through your rather impressive resume, but we'd really love to hear specifically more about your officiating journey. So how did you get started in officiating, and what were some of the steps along the way to kind of get you to where you are now?
So I was coaching at Lewis Mills at the time, coaching basketball, and there was gentlemen that were officiating my games that I was coaching, and they'd kind of run by and they'd be like, "Hey, when you're done on this coaching side, you can be welcome to the referee world." And I kindly said, "Thank you very much. I appreciate that, but there's no chance that I'm going to run up and down a court and be screamed at by people like myself." So it was specifically Dick Coleman and Mark Scazafava and Bob Ferrati and Ted Zalowski. Those were four gentlemen that would work a ton of my games when I was coaching. And it did take a couple years before I said, you know what, let me just see what this avenue is. So it was IABO board number 7. And we would have, they brought me to the meetings and welcomed me with open arms. And I had to go every Monday night and do the classes and take my tests. And I was so nervous because you had to get an 85. I'm still the NCAA requirement as well at 85%. I still get very nervous about taking the test every year. But I took my test and then I was able to get some 5th and 6th grade basketball games. I spent pretty much every weekend in the Washington Montessori school working games, being told how terrible I was by every parent, every coach, just like I was on the sideline, apologizing to the officials that I had yelled at over the years, not realizing how hard it actually was to blow a whistle and have to make a decision so quickly. But keeping kind of in that same fashion, I worked many high school basketball games. And then as a mentor in himself, Dick Coleman said, I think you should go to a college camp. And having no idea what that meant, my husband and I actually now host these camps for officials training. So it's a full circle there. But went to my first college camp in the summer of 2009, and then was hired in the Ivy League to work my first Division I games in 2010. 2009, 2010 was my first Division I season. But those college camps started in Division III. So that was 2006 when I got hired for my first Division III conferences. And worked games in the wintertime, and then did the same thing every summer. Did my professional development, went to camps, read the rule book, worked on my mechanics in my mirror, watched other people's videos, asked questions, got a mentor. Just, it really engulfed myself in learning what the officiating side of things was in terms of X's and O's. And it's really just been that cycle ever since. So whether it's Division III, Division II, Division I, it's always been work your games in the wintertime, do your professional development in the off season, and then as independent contractors, hope that you get another contract come September.
Absolutely. So Karissa, kind of a question for you. Having known Maggie as a player, seeing her as a student, were you surprised that she went into officiating, or did you think that was kind of a natural fit for her?
Well, that's a great question. I think anything Maggie wanted to do was going to be a fit. And it's not because Maggie wanted it, it's because Maggie's that gifted. So had she chose a pathway into coaching, a pathway into officiating, professionally, she's got another pathway that she's very well established in. I'm not surprised. Maggie is a student of anything she does. And I think that there's a difference between staying at a level that you're at and then getting better because you want to for the right reasons. When you do something for the right reasons, you become a student of that endeavor. If you just want to do it to get to an end destination for external reasons that are more superficial, you're going to struggle. You got to put the work in. Everything Maggie has ever done has been about hard work. Nobody practices harder. Nobody works harder. Nobody studies something harder. So she chose the officiating pathway. I'm not at all surprised that she had a fairly accelerated journey because she did the work. So nobody can question that. And I think I love what you said about the Washington Montessori. I wonder in the officiating profession if we need to focus on that very, very grassroots level and some sort of support system for the people that are there is, but no, and I'm rambling a bit here because that's Maggie, but no, I'm not at all surprised that she chose that or that she's successful at it, because she could have chosen to do anything and been successful at it. But I think her story is terrific, and she embodies what it takes, but what it takes without losing who you are as a person, without losing the fact that you have relationships and you have family. And it's a lot of hard work and being a good student. I mean, she's done that, so I'm not surprised at all.
It's awesome. And, Maggie, I love what you said about having coached and having, maybe gotten on some officials, and how that really did help you as you were learning the craft, because it is different to be on the other side of the clipboard or the whistle or whatever the case may be. And I love that you were able to kind of take a step back and go, man, maybe this isn't as easy as I thought it was when I was coaching, because I think that there's some value to that. We say it all the time. We're like, officials should have to coach and coaches should have to officiate one game, because it's so much easier to criticize the person on the other side of it when you haven't walked a mile in those shoes. So I love that you brought that up, and I love how you really talk about how that helped you succeed as an official, because it's a different perspective. Not everybody's walked that same path in their journey.
So funny, just quick little story. The first time I ever worked a UConn women's basketball game, I was at Gamble Pavilion, and at the time, it was prior to COVID, obviously. So and I say that because things have changed where the table crews don't come into our locker room any longer. So we go out and we talk with them before the game in an open space versus they would come into our locker room. So my face was as white as a piece of paper that I'm looking at the moment when the woman that was one of our field hockey umpires for years, and I'm saying years, when I was coaching at Lewis Mills, she was in charge of the shot clock on the table at the UConn basketball game. Arguably one of the hardest things to do during a game is to keep the shot clock, because you can't watch the game. You have to think about possessions, and it's a critical piece of timing that can have significant implications on a game. And here she was coming into the locker room, and I remember just falling to my knees and saying, I am so sorry for all the times that I ever ran up and down that sideline yelling at you. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to apologize on behalf of many of us that just don't understand how hard it is to officiate.
That's amazing that you were able to have that conversation with her. But I can imagine it's like seeing a ghost. You're like, oh my God.
And then not to mention the fact that when I went to officiating, I thought I was betraying my one and only true role model in my entire life, as all of those accolades that I'm a doctor because Karissa's a doctor. It's as simple as that. She was going through her doctoral program when I was teaching, and I did everything that she did. I went to school to be a phys ed teacher. I went and got my master's in educational leadership because that's what she was doing. So every decision that I had ever made was because I wanted to be her. So when I started to officiate, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't follow in those footsteps any longer. Like, this is a big change. I'm not going to stay in high school. I'm not going to be a principal. I'm not going to be an administrator. And I don't know if I'm going to be okay with that. And I just remember feeling torn inside emotionally, because she was everything I aspired to be. So that piece of officiating, when you asked her if that was a pathway for me, absolutely not. Because I was supposed to be an administrator. I was supposed to go and lead whatever organization that she left, and then I was going to take her spot.
You're going to wait in the wings.
Because that's just the way it was. We always just seemed to find the same pieces and enjoy the same things. So officiating was certainly not something that was ever on my radar.
It's amazing.
Well, Maggie, I think you get yelled at more than I do directly now.
I think it's probably better that I get yelled at directly, though.
That's probably true. There's something to be said about that. They're yelling at you.
Yeah, they just come in email formats. Yeah.
So passive-aggressive email is much worse than the gentleman who is screaming my name and expletives on the sideline.
Because you see that, like, what's happening. It's not covert at all.
No. You don't stop and say to that gentleman, excuse me, let me just pause this game. Tell me how you really feel, sir.
During a timeout. I have made some really good friends on the sideline at some really great institutions and know a lot about some of the seat holders now because there's just timeouts where you just simply share, yeah, I do have a beating heart. And sometimes some of those comments, they just hurt. I'm doing the very best that I can at every single time I run up and down this court, and we may not always agree, but I do have that thing that's inside my chest. And sometimes it hurts when I make a mistake, just as much as whatever your profession is.
I love that. So, Maggie, in addition to officiating basketball, as we mentioned in your intro, you've served as an LPGA golf professional, an educator, a multi-sport coach, and then not to mention your role in sports psychology. So throughout the years, have you been able to balance wearing all of these hats over time?
Yes, it depends on who you ask if it was actually a balancing act. And it actually looked like the lady that comes and balances all the bowls on top of her sticks at halftime, which we're never allowed to go see. I want to see that. And then I want to see the dogs catching the Frisbees. But we're always at halftime talking about all the things that we've done wrong and we need to make right. And so the balancing act probably was a little bit much, but I guess if you want to give anything, you give it to somebody who's busy. Isn't that the way the sound or the snippet was? Like, give it to somebody who's already doing 10 things and they'll get it done. So I was teaching and coaching and refereeing. Those were three things that I was definitely doing at the same time. And then in 2014, I started my doctoral work, and probably those four, by the time I got to a handful of things that were all coinciding, some things were just going to have to change a little bit. So I did stop teaching and coaching in 2015 and focused on finishing my doctorate and then officiating full time. And I'm sure we'll get into my better half of my husband. He was an official who's now a supervisor to this day. And he was just my saving grace in order to allow me to be able to do those two things. Without him, I would not have been able to give up teaching and go and pursue a job that, as my dad so well taught me, I was supposed to have a biweekly paycheck. And officiating was the furthest thing from a solid job opportunity. So being able to just do those two things from 2015 on, and then I finished my doctorate in 2016 and really am doing those three things. The LPGA came in as a COVID project because everything went online. So Mike, again, saving grace, was like, hey, we're not doing anything. Why don't you get your LPGA stuff, because you're already teaching people mentally with the aspects of golf. So it'd be a good pair. And I never would have thought of it. In all honesty, I wouldn't have thought of that combination. And because they put everything virtually, I was able to do my studies during COVID and had to pass a plane test, which was nerve-wracking, and then some in-person evaluations. But teaching, I mean, you got evaluated all the time with your lesson plan. So you had to follow this 12-step program in terms of teaching. So the LPGA piece was, they had a really great program, very supportive, very educational in nature. So it's very similar to teaching and mentoring as a teacher leader. So that piece came in 2020.
If I could jump in here.
Let's do it. Anytime during this, Karissa, you got an open mic.
So Maggie picked up golf, and I think within 2 years in Connecticut, she was like the club champion. So that's just Maggie.
It was my field hockey swing. It was your doing. You taught me how to swing a field hockey stick. I never picked up one. And by the way, I don't think I came bebopping up to your car like that.
Yes, you did. Really? Yes, you did. It was a red Prelude, remember? I was sitting in it, and you came running up to the driver's side window.
You had the blondest hair ever. I do remember that. I do. Okay, I do.
It might have happened.
But you were the friend I met. Are you our new field hockey coach? Yeah.
I was such a geek. I was so excited. I'd never played the sport before in my life, so I was like, why don't I just...
There's the other thing. She'd never played field hockey either.
Really?
So it just, her gifts they're just no limits. So
sounds that way. I'm impressed. I'm wedged in between these powerhouses right now. It's pretty amazing. So we're gonna jump into the topic of the day. So as I had mentioned, I was fortunate to hear Maggie speak at the Professional Association of Volleyball Officials Convention in 2023 in Tampa Bay in a presentation entitled Mindset Matters. So, Maggie, can you tell our audience about the premise of Mindset Matters and why it's important in officiating?
So, Mindset Matters comes from Content Matters. And that was the name of the company that my dissertation editor, Rose Johnston, which ironically, Johnston was my family's name from Scotland. So she ended up being the editor of my dissertation, and her company was Content Matters. And I must have rewritten my problem statement 30, the number of times that I had to send things to her. And she was so kind. She had so much knowledge and expertise, and she would just be patient with me and send things back. And so I was searching for a name when my business began, and I thought of Rose because I would never have been where I was without her. So that was the inception of Mindset Matters that came off of Rose's Content Matters. The idea was to guide and help people in maximizing their performance with the knowledge and expertise, just as Rose had done for me. In a patient and kind way. I wanted to be able to do that with people, whether it was performance on a field, on a court, in a courtroom, as a police officer, as a law enforcement agent. Been humbled to be able to work with a lot of different people to rise to their maximum potential.
That's amazing. So kind of as a continuation of that, so your background isn't in volleyball officiating, but you were asked obviously to speak at this National Volleyball Officiating Convention. So can you talk a little bit about how mindset is one of those concepts that really applies to all sports? There's certain things that are very sport specific. How does mindset kind of transcend sport?
So I think the background of being a gymnast, I never knew this until I started to actually study this. If you think about being a gymnast and being on a balance beam, you would never think about falling off. You would never think about doing something that would cause you harm, almost catastrophic injury. So the idea of having that mindset of what you wanted to do versus what could possibly go wrong was a thought process that when you think about officials, we always have to be thinking in the present moment. We have to be focused on the most important pieces of that play. And I'll just use basketball since that's really where my mind is. Or even field hockey. I assigned field hockey officials. So I do have the thought process of my umpires at the time. So I'm back and forth between officials and umpires. And I always feel bad because I say referee and then umpire, and my umpires get mad and my referees get mad. But the ability to focus and block out all those external stimuli to be able to just take the relevant cues and be able to make the best decisions. Meanwhile, you have fans yelling, you have coaches yelling, you have players yelling, you have the actual play that's in front of you that you have to dissect and then put into context of what has happened in the entire game. So being able to manage all of those pieces, the stress, the anxiety, being able to make those sound judgments in an argumentative and competitive environment of which the negative reactions, your own personal self-esteem, your own emotional control, your own mental toughness, those are all pieces that have to go on behind the scenes. And that behind the scenes is the 4 or 5 inches that we have in between our ears that have to somehow coincide with the X's and O's of calling a block charge.
That is fascinating. Like, just to hear you break that down is unbelievable, because I don't know how much thought people actually put into that as far as what's happening and processing a call from the time you put air in the whistle to the time you report. Like that's amazing to me. And, kind of going along in that presentation, you had talked about the predictability of human behavior patterns. So how does the recognition of those patterns help officials in their chosen sports?
So the big C, communication. One of my mentors always said that there's 3 C's: consistency, communication, and for the life of me, I'm forgetting the last one at the moment because my brain is on communication. When I first started, I'm a personality style that just likes to get things right. As Karissa mentioned, I'm a competitor. I like to win and I like to be right. So as an official, if I was right, which meant that I applied the rules correctly, and if I won, meaning that, coach, you're wrong, I'm right, I thought that was a victory because I'm doing my job. Rest assured, I was pulled aside very quickly and said, if you don't figure out how to communicate better, this is going to be a very short-lived career for you. And I was like, well, gosh, I think I'm doing just fine. Because from my perspective, someone who likes to be right and who likes to win, I was doing that. So that perspective of how I viewed the world, there was nothing wrong. But when that person came to me and said a different perspective, me being the geek that I am, I didn't know what that meant. So I went and studied it. So I went and studied human behavior to figure out that there are different temperaments, there are different combinations of styles of people. So if somebody likes more details, if someone wants to make sure that everybody is included, if there's others like me that don't really care about your feelings but just want to be right, that's the piece of the communication that I was missing. I could make a correct call on the floor, but the perspective of a coach, I had to figure that out to make sure that the way that I communicated to him or her, maybe they don't need to know what the call was, right or wrong. Maybe they just need to realize that I'm there to help support them to have their kids have the best opportunity to win the game or make them feel as though they are heard. Their perspective is validated. Their angle on a play is very different than mine. So I don't need to go and tell them what I saw. They already know. They saw what I reported to the table. But if I can say, hey, what did you see on that play? 15 years ago, asking a question would never have even occurred to me. Now, to the two of you, probably they would have, knowing Karissa as well as I do, and Dana knowing you for the moments that we've known each other moving up to this. Very intuitive, emotionally connected people. Very different than Maggie's natural personality style. So those pieces of that human interaction, I would arguably say now is more important than making the correct call.
Absolutely. And we talk so much about how such a large part of officiating isn't even in the rule book. And it's not in the mechanics manual. It's the soft skills, it's the communication, it's managing personalities and understanding all of the stuff that's happening within the game that isn't anywhere in a book anywhere. It's just the experiential part of officiating, and it's hard to teach that. Like, it really is. And Karissa and I talk a lot in the office about what can we do to better support officials, and one of the things that we're really talking about is how to help them understand this part of the game that you're talking about, because it's not something that, like you said, for a lot of people it's not going to come naturally. So it's something that they have to do some study outside of the confines of their rule book, mechanics manual, whatever officiating training materials that they have. So this is such a great topic. I'm so excited that you're doing this, because it's important, and it's important for officials in all sports to hear this, because it is relevant in any sport at any level, because you are dealing with other human beings who may not function the same way that you do, or receive messages the way that you do. The human behavior patterns is super fascinating to me. I've got a little bit of geek in me as well, Maggie. So you're my kind of people.
Well, you're going to motivate me if I say it out loud, because I always say take it out of the clouds and put it in pen. Well, if you say it out loud, then perhaps maybe the book that's sitting on my computer right now, which is what you just said. There's a mechanics manual, there's a rule book, but the book that I'm trying to create for officials will be that book to help understand the right body language, the words and the actions to connect with coaches and players and stakeholders, just as a rule book would be, or just as a mechanics manual would be. And both of those things are guidelines. It's not always going to be the right thing that we say or do, but if we can have as much knowledge as we possibly can have from people that have been there and done it, so to speak, that communication handbook is something that it's dear to my heart. It saved my job, and I'm doing my best. I keep writing, and then I write again, and then I edit it, and then I say it's too long. So I'm saying it out loud. I'm going to do it, Dana and Chris. I'm going to do it.
I'm so all in. When you said that, my eyes lit up, because it's something that's so necessary. And I mean, if you ask Karissa, I don't think anything's ever too long. I like words, so brevity is not my strong suit at all. So excited to see where that goes, Maggie. And Karissa, you're taking notes furiously. What's on your mind, boss?
Well, I'm listening to Maggie, of course, and Dana, knowing you. I would push back a little bit on the fact that you say you're too long, because you don't use a word that doesn't make an impact. So you are by far the best communicator in words in our office, and your relationships nationally with the officials community and others is unsurpassed. So, but listening to Maggie, and I'm fascinated, Maggie, by the notion that a communication handbook, I think is huge.
Unreal.
When you talked about the human piece maybe being equal or more important than the getting it right piece, and what did you see? And I would imagine, never having been an official, but does that diffuse for at least a second? Just asking the question, does it diffuse the emotion that's there, that's volatile, just for a second, to then have a little bit more of a rational, reflective thought exchange, if you can do that. But I love that idea, and I'd love for us as the NFHS to engage, and Dana, obviously through your leadership in our office, working with your officials in supporting Maggie's initiative around a communication handbook. It sounds brilliant, and you all are the experts, but I'm writing notes because I think it's a fabulous idea.
It is.
And I want to make sure that the NFHS supports it.
100%. That, I mean, that's good stuff. And it's the thing that we always get asked about. It's so funny because we're an organization that writes rules, but when it's talking to people in the officiating world, they're not asking us so much for the rules materials. They're wanting all the other stuff, like the communication skills and the conflict resolution skills and all of those things. And it's like, well, they're not in a book somewhere, but they're about to be. It's on
They're
a
about to
podcast.
be. Yeah. And the NFHS is an official publishing agency. So, I mean, we publish our rules manuals and such. So we have all of those licensing privileges. So I would love, Maggie, I would love for you to stay in touch with us through Dana. And if the officials community, Dana, says this is great, we need this, and let's have the NFHS get behind it and
Absolutely.
support this.
Good stuff. Good
I
stuff.
certainly would be. You don't need to ask me. I am all in. So being able to be on a dynamic team that I'm looking at right now would be an honor.
Well, thank you. It would be our honor. It's out in the universe now. So
Yeah, it's there.
It's
I
there.
got to come
So,
through.
That's right.
I gotta keep the train alive. If I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna have to follow it through.
Well, I was going to say no pressure, but I think you do well under pressure. So pressure.
Oh, yes.
There it is.
The computer will be up when we get off, and I'm gonna pull up the little folder that says book.
I love it. That sounds like something I would do, like 100%. I think,
Yes,
I think
it
you and I
does.
have a lot in common, Maggie.
Yes,
So
you do.
I've been kind of researching you. I mean, some people might call it stalking, but I'm going to call it researching. So I've been looking at your website, which is mindsetmattersllc.com. And one of the things I noticed is that you offer subscriptions specific to sports officials. What are these? Can you tell us about what these subscriptions entail?
Absolutely. So the idea that mental performance coaching is something that is out there. We just watched the U.S. Open and an amazing ending to the U.S. Open. I say golf for a reason because it's been much more prominent of people sharing that they have their mental performance coaches in that particular sport. So the performance side of my business is with individuals, with teams, with businesses. However, the officiating community is one where we share information wholeheartedly and without reservation, not charging a dime. That's just what officials do for one another. It's never been something that is, you just mentor. You give people information, you pay it forward. And the ability to combine the business aspect of it, the intellectual, and I only say this term because someone taught me it, the intellectual ability to teach somebody something, because I was giving this information for free because that's just what teachers and coaches did, and especially referees. And actually one of my good referee friends was like, you probably should be charging for this because like you're a doctor. And I was like, I guess, but yeah. So I created these subscriptions, which are a small fee, and officials will sign up and we dive right into their personality styles, their behavioral traits. So I use the psychology piece to help them understand how they view the world, what their natural body language, their natural choice of words, their natural temperaments are, and then use that same foundational piece to help them understand how someone else may see a similar situation. So once we do that personally on a one-to-one basis, then we can bring in coaches. We can bring in partners that we have that we officiate with. And inevitably, we're all unique in our own way. However, there's some pretty good indicators of when people come into a locker room, for example. If they open up their bag and everything is in one of those nice little tidy packing cubes and they go to their same spot and they put their towel out and they line everything up. And so those are some cues that we can gather. But if I don't know what that is, and this goes back to the communication book, if I don't recognize what those cues are, I may irritate that person and ask them how their trip in was. Well, they probably don't want to talk about how their trip in was because they just want to get to the pregame. They just want to get to the X's and O's of working. So the subscription piece allows people to understand how they are naturally and then how they can better perform as an official on the court and in the locker room with each other for team dynamic purposes on an individual one-to-one basis.
That is so cool. Like I'm so geeked up about that. Like that's the coolest thing ever because like I said, that personality management, because when you think about it, we talk in officiating all the time about having to manage the personalities of coaches and players and maybe even your table crew. But we don't talk enough about that dynamic with the crew and how you can have three very different personalities on a basketball crew. And that can be sometimes a difficult situation if your personalities clash. And we know that sometimes officials get their assignments and they see who they're working with and they're like, oh my gosh, because they know that the pregame is going to be lousy, and then there's going to be conflict maybe within the crew, and you're probably not going to post game because there's somebody on the crew who goes, we've done this for 30 years, we don't have to do this. So that personality assessment just of the people that are on the same team, super fascinating. Like, that is really cool. That stuff makes you so excited. That's awesome.
And one of the best parts about it is that the officials that I work with, including myself, like this is me saying it as a learner myself, is that instead of now looking at my assignments and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to work with this person, now I'm looking at it from the lens of they are going to be so good with the rules. So if something goes wrong, I'm going to make sure that I go to Ted and make sure that we did this correctly. Or if they have a super energetic personality, which may be a deterrent for me, I'm now going to use that because they're going to be able to diffuse a coach just like that with that infectious personality. Typically, those style of people are extremely good communicators. So somehow in their way, they're able to take a highly contentious situation and bring it to a manageable spot. Whereas that may irritate me, their bubbly personality in a locker room, just because that's opposite of who I am. I'm now going to see that as a huge positive for our team, which then helps that whole team dynamic.
That's so cool, because then you can play to their strengths. So I mean, that is that's really cool. I'm so fascinated. Now I want to go on and just play with the tool. So I don't know.
We can give you your behavioral assessment. It'll take you all of, with how fast you read, it'll take you all of 15 minutes, and then we're going to have your blueprint ready to go and ready to dissect.
That's really cool. I love that. So kind of continuing on with the work that you do, Maggie, you do work with teams and coaches regarding their teams and cultures and getting teams to perform consistently. So you've touched on a little bit about this, but how do some of those specific concepts really apply to officiating?
I think we just talked about that team chemistry there. It's exactly the same with teams and the individuals that make up the teams. So I'll take a field hockey team. If you have 17 kids that are trying to share a locker room together with 17 different personality blends, whereas something may irritate us one day, now we're seeing it as, oh, okay. And now I can just take it for what it's worth because that's how she's made. I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to think poorly about it. And I'm not actually going to think about it anymore because it doesn't have any bearing on how we're going to interact on the field together, keeping a field hockey example here. But that personality piece, oftentimes, especially with, and I work primarily with female teams, the dynamic of the female personalities on top of performance. If you have people that are emotional in nature versus people that are very task in nature, if I just need a hug and you want to win, well, our worlds are never going to be able to collide, but I'm supposed to be your center back. I need a hug. I'm your center back. Like I'm your key to your defense. I don't need a hug. Well, maybe yeah, I do. So now all of a sudden you look at me a different way. Now I know, okay, I get it because I've understood the personality differences that we've worked on together as a team. And now I can go over there and just give you that pat on the back and that hug, which I normally would never have done. But I get it now because that's going to help you perform. So working with the behavioral styles of student athletes individually and then putting them up on a team chart and seeing where they all fall together. Oh my gosh, you should see the look of these kids' faces when they see this chart. And they're like, oh my God, Susie, now I know why you are the way you are. So then they can then perform better collectively as a team because they understand each other's strengths and weaknesses.
That's all. And it just, I mean, that applies to everything. It's teams, it's officials, it's corporate America, it's anything where you have to interact with other people. It's relationships. I mean, it's anything where you really are going, okay, so that's what makes this person tick. I think that's, you know, we probably don't dig into that enough just as human beings. We aren't thinking about that. Everybody's kind of in their own little bubble and we just go about our way. But I think that being able to understand how people are wired at their core is, it really can change dynamics in a really positive way. But we're getting to the last question. But before we get there, Karissa, what are your thoughts, or do you have any questions for Maggie, for Mags as you call her?
Mags, yeah. So just number one, just appreciation. I think I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about no matter what role we play, there's an emotional intelligence piece to whatever we do in the world, and especially with situations that, like sport, you are pinned in the extremes of emotion, where optically you're exposed to public view, you're winning and losing, and everything is exciting or heartbreaking, and you run the gamut there. But the emotional intelligence piece that Maggie's talking about her work, I think is vital. And to do the work so that when you get in the moments where you have only a half of a second to react, if it becomes ingrained and understood that here are my teammates, and the coach knows who my players are, and the officials as teams know who my teammates are, when you're in those moments, you react with some intelligence, and there are only better outcomes there. And I mean, that's what makes championships. Call a championship a great evening for an officials team on the court. That was a championship win. Call it a win in a game, call it anything. But I just love, Maggie, the work that you're doing. I think it's insightful, it's important. It's what we haven't talked about enough for years. And I just applaud you and commend you for that work. And I think the more we can do, Dana, you and I, and with Maggie and others, to call attention to the humanity in officiating and the respect for individuals in officiating, understanding how we work together is so important. I just think this is a great area of work that we need to prioritize. And I hope that the outcome will be that each individual official feels understood, appreciated, identified, they belong. And again, we want to support it.
Thank you, Karissa. So Maggie, our last question for you on the podcast is, the From A to Zebra podcast has a mission every week to educate, elevate, and excite our listeners. So what can you tell us about mindset and officiating that helps us to accomplish this mission?
All right, Dana. So I'm going to have to tell everybody that I did maybe have this question ahead of time. So I had to, I'm thinking to myself, I had to prepare like a pretty good answer for this. So it's going to sound pretty canned because I thought about it like a couple days ago and I was like, oh, this is really cool. So like, we just spoke about the education on areas beyond rules and mechanics. Officiating is just not rules and mechanics. We have to educate beyond that. So whether that's mindset, and then the bridge off of that is the communication piece. I mean, we didn't even talk about the goal setting, the confidence and the visualization and the stress management and the emotional regulation. Those are all things that my referee subscribers, we talk about on a weekly or monthly basis. But then the elevating piece by adding, I think I put in quotes on my little paper here, the how-to of communication of our work. Human behavior is predictable. So if we can understand the patterns of human behavior, we can make an educated guess, which is what I'm doing when I'm officiating. I'm taking the rules that are written in a book, I'm applying it to living, breathing, moving humans on a court, and I'm making my best application of those. I'm not going to call it a guess because someone will snip that out and put it on some other kind of video, but we're taking that information and we're putting it to our work. So the elevate piece is the how-to of communication. And then the excitement piece, oh my goodness, the ability to challenge ourselves to reach our maximum potential. My God, there is no better feeling than walking off of a court as an officiating crew with saying we did the absolute best we possibly could on that game. Yeah, we're going to make mistakes. Absolutely. We're human, just as kids miss shots, just as coaches have wrong plays. But the excitement piece of knowing that we had these three pieces all together, that's just it. The challenge to me each and every night, and I know that's one of the reasons why I chose officiating, is that extreme challenge, because it is something every single night. But this piece of human behavior, it takes a little bit of that worry and that anxiousness out of it, because now we have tools to understand how to create that commonality so that our student athletes get the best possible night.
That didn't even seem canned. That was a great answer. Couple of thank yous. So Dr. Karissa Niehoff, thank you so much for connecting me, and Maggie, thanks for being kind of a guest co-host. So that was fun. You know,
it's a privilege.
When Nate's not on, I'm going to get you on the show all the time. This is going to be good. You're good. co-host on From A to Zebra on your resume. I mean, you don't
Right.
need it, but
Call
go
me in
ahead
off the bench, Dana. I'm coming in. That's it.
and Maggie Tieman, I have to say, I was a fan when I heard you speak in Tampa, and even a bigger fan now. That was outstanding and such good information. We'll make sure everybody heard your website. If you want to say it again for anybody who wants to check it out, Maggie.
Goodness, www.mindsetmattersllc.
Check it out. There's great stuff on there. Maggie Tieman, what a great night. Thank you so much for joining us on the From A to Zebra podcast. Karissa, thanks for doing a repeat performance on the From A to Zebra podcast. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on the From A to Zebra podcast. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and X for more information about the show. See you next time. All right.
Be sure to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, and also catch From A to Zebra on Instagram at from_A_2_zebra, Facebook From A to Zebra podcast, and on X at From A to Zebra.